I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys. I don't really have any meaningful or substantial reason why I decided to make this video. I just think that it's awesome that Mel Brooks is still alive at the time of recording, at the amazing age of 98. A true living legend. And also the fact that my YouTube homepage has been bombarded by reaction videos to his films. And I've been watching them, and the reactions are hilarious, and the films are hilarious, so I just made a decision. I watched the comedic legend's entire filmography, and now I'm gonna rank it. Which films were the best? Which films were the funniest? Let's find out. Before I begin, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video. I really appreciate it. So without further ado, this is every Mel Brooks film ranked from worst to best. Number 11. Life Stinks. Throughout his entire filmmaking career, I don't think Mel Brooks has ever actually made a bad film, but if any of his films ever got close to it, it was this one. Life Stinks is Mel Brooks' worst film because he gives up almost everything that makes his films great. It's easily the least funny of his films, with laughs coming few and far between. There are no fourth wall breaks, and the subject matter is way more realistic and down to earth than his other films. I mean, criticizing wealth inequality and shining a light on the terrible living conditions that people below the poverty line experience is an admirable thing to do, but I'm not sure Mel Brooks is the guy for the job. With all that being said, the film wasn't terrible. I actually did care about the characters here, which is very important, and the film does have a good heart. It also apparently served as the inspiration for the ashes scene in The Big Lebowski. I mean, there's a scene exactly like it here, and this film was released like, what, 7 years before The Big Lebowski? So, go figure. The film does have some things going for it, but it's still one of the lowest lows of Mel Brooks' career, just like what the character experiences in the movie. An okay film in general, but really nothing too special, and pretty easily Mel Brooks' worst. Trying to think of the funniest moment in the film, there was really only one scene that actually made me laugh out loud, and that was the scene when he takes off her clothes.
Hurry, hurry.
I am.
Number 10. The 12 Chairs. This is the other semi-serious Mel Brooks film, although here it leans way more on the comedy than Life Stinks, but still way less than his other work. This was an okay movie, with a few funny moments, but overall it wasn't anything too special. The story of two men living in the communist Soviet Union, trying to locate a chair with diamonds hidden inside the fabric, was nothing to write home about, and the two leads were average at best. And still, just like Life Stinks, it does have some things going for it. I did like the priest character. That guy was insane and annoying, but in a good way. The film also had some creative and funny uses of fast motion applied, and it actually worked, even though it looked a bit rough visually. A large portion of the jokes were directed at mocking communism, which I, as a liberty lover, appreciated quite a bit. But unfortunately, the film wasn't all that funny as a whole. Something that is interesting about it is that it serves as the on-screen debut of Mel Brooks himself as an actor, and while he is pretty funny when he's on screen, he barely gets any screen time in this movie. I wish we could have seen a bit more of him. The 12 Chairs was a fun enough time, but it's certainly far from Mel Brooks' best. The funniest moment in the film was actually right at the beginning, and it's the song that opens the film. The lyrics were really funny, and the singing choir's delivery was just the right amount of over the top. Number 9. High Anxiety. Now we're getting to spoof territory, so you're gonna notice a rise in quality from here on out. This film is basically a love letter to Hitchcock, and I'm all for that. High Anxiety makes fun of his tropes, and it spoofs some of his most famous scenes, from classics such as Psycho, The Birds, and Vertigo. Some of the jokes are super obvious and make it easy for people to understand exactly what Brooks is making fun of, but there are a few jokes that are more subtle, and you'll need to be more knowledgeable than the average viewer to catch the reference. The story was more interesting here, about a man who is called to run a mental institution after his predecessor died under mysterious circumstances. High Anxiety actually does take its plot relatively more seriously than other films of his, but here, unlike the previous two entries, it works better because it's obviously still a comedy and the silliness is way more prominent. I love the characters in this movie as well. Mel Brooks does a really good job in the leading role as a psychiatrist suffering from high anxiety. Cloris Leachman and Harvey Korman make a fun villainous duo. Madeline Kahn satires the archetypal Hitchcock blonde very amusingly, and a few scenes really made me laugh here, like the psychiatry conference where the language needs to be censored because there are children present.
Where the babies come out of, the woo. The woo-woo.
The woo-woo.
High Anxiety was a pretty effective spoof of Hitchcock's style, and I had a good time with it. However, Mel Brooks has made much better films than this one, which we will get to soon. The funniest moment in this film was one of the most ridiculous murders I've ever seen in a car. Number 8. Dracula, Dead and Loving It. As you'll see further along this list, Mel Brooks has made 2 spoofs of classic and beloved horror stories. This is easily the lesser of the 2, but I still had fun with it. This is Mel Brooks' final directorial effort, which is kind of an odd way for him to wrap up his directing career, but what do I know. Dracula Dead and Loving It, in my opinion, serves as a well-made spoof of the Dracula story. Leslie Nielsen was entertaining as Dracula. It wasn't his funniest film or performance by any stretch, but the jokes were funny enough for my liking. His facial expressions were really good in this film. Mel Brooks plays Van Helsing, and it was a typical Mel Brooks performance. Pretty well done. And Peter MacNicol does a really good job as Renfield. But the MVP of the film is Harvey Korman, who delivers what is, in my opinion, one of his more underrated comedic performances as Dr. Seward. I loved the whole distinguished and respected doctor shtick, coupled with his trademark silliness. He did it really well. I don't think the film is anything too special. The filmmaking is nothing to write home about, the performances, while good, aren't amazing or anything, and the jokes weren't the funniest I've ever seen. But with all that being said, I still had a good enough time with it due to my personal love of the Dracula story and all the classic horror tropes. If you're a fan of classic horror, then I do believe that Dracula Dead and Loving It is worth your time. The funniest moment in the film was when they needed to shove a stake through Lucy's heart.
Oh my God!
Number 7. Silent Movie. Yes, this is actually a legit, true-to-form, silent film made by Mel Brooks. While I can definitely appreciate the concept and the filmmaking behind this feature, I found the film to be decently funny, but nothing too special or memorable. Still, this film is a good time. It is easily Mel Brooks' most meta film ever. It tells the story of a director who wants to make a silent film, and the only way for him to receive the budget he needs for it is to enlist a bunch of Hollywood A-listers to be a part of the project. Sounds familiar? Naturally, this film has a massive amount of celebrity cameos. You got Burt Reynolds, James Caan, Liza Minnelli, Paul Newman. Hell, it'll be shorter to draft a list of names that aren't in this film. My favorite cameo was probably Anne Bancroft. Her scene was excellent. Other than the whole meta element though, the story and characters were devoid of any weight or meaning. I guess the only character traits we get are that Mel Brooks has a drinking problem and Marty Feldman is horny. That's it. But it's pretty clear this isn't the focus of the film. The film is just about the laughs, and more often than not, it delivers. The film is chock full of slapstick comedy, and usually it managed to get a laugh out of me, but never more than just a nice chuckle. The film's premise and style does lend itself to a few creative laughs and set pieces, but I usually judge comedies by the frequency and quality of the laughs, and even though the film was high on quantity, the quality was uneven, unfortunately. Still, I rather enjoyed this one. It was a nice experience overall, and it easily earns a spot near the middle of the list. The funniest moment was a ridiculous set piece involving elevators. Number 6. Spaceballs. This is one of Mel Brooks' most well-known and beloved films, so I wonder if placing it dead center on this list is a controversial take. Regardless, I can definitely see the appeal of this movie, and I can safely say that from here on out, I highly enjoy and love all of these films. Spaceballs has a lot going for it. The visuals, while still looking cheap and dated, are some of the best of Mel's filmography, with the characters being some of the most iconic, especially the villainous Dark Helmet, played hilariously by Rick Moranis. But the best thing about this film is the jokes. When they land. Because when they do, they're some of his all-time best. The film breaks the fourth wall more times and in more creative ways than in any of his films. Silent Movie might be his most meta film, but Spaceballs easily has the most meta scene, where the villains use the actual Spaceballs videotape to find out where the heroes are located.
Now. You're looking at now, sir. Everything that happens now is happening now.
I'm not exaggerating when I say that this scene is the stuff of comedy legend. So I think it's pretty clear that I hold Spaceballs in high regard. So why isn't it higher on the list? Well, what brings this film down for me is that with all the good jokes, there are also a lot of bad jokes that just don't land. This film is probably the most uneven in terms of its humor that Mel Brooks has ever made. For every funny joke, there's an unfunny one. with most of them, strangely enough, revolving around the two characters that Mel Brooks plays himself. President Scroob is easily the least funny of the three main villains, and Yogurt jokes about Spaceballs merchandise way too much, and none of these jokes made me laugh. It's a shame, but overall, Spaceballs is still lots of fun, and I enjoy watching it every time that it's on. The funniest moment is when the villains comb the desert.
What about you guys? We ain't found shit!
Number 5. Robin Hood Men in Tights. This is a spoof of the Robin Hood story, and more specifically, the 1991 film starring Kevin Costner, and it was great. I found this film to be hilarious, mostly because I think the comedic performances in this film were excellent. Cary Elwes was charming and charismatic in this movie, with great facial expressions and line delivery. He was really funny and a joy to watch. Roger Rees, who played the Sheriff of Rottingham, was also incredibly funny here, playing the doofus villain role to perfection. It was also really entertaining to see Dave Chappelle in this movie, knowing where he is now and how he evolved throughout his career. Even Patrick Stewart is in this film. Yeah, he makes a very short cameo near the end. That's awesome. This film is also a musical, apparently. There are a bunch of songs and musical numbers in this movie, and they were also, shocker, really funny. This is the film that Mel Brooks made after Life Stinks, his worst and least funny film in my opinion. So it was a real treat to see the fourth wall breaks come back with a vengeance here. They were really well done, creative, and sometimes even surprising. My favorite one was probably the mole that keeps changing locations on Prince John's face. The laughs here are great both in quality and quantity, but the reason why it's not even higher on my list is that the last 4 films offer a bit more than just that. Robin Hood Men in Tights doesn't have much going for it except for the comedy, but the comedy element in this film is so strong, the film is so entertaining and fun, that I didn't really need anything else. It's just a dumb fun time, and I enjoyed every minute. The funniest moment was when Robin asks the villagers to lend him their ears.
Lend me your ears! That's disgusting.
Number 4. The Producers. The one that started it all. This is Mel Brooks' directorial debut, and it kicked off his directing career in really strong fashion. The premise of the film is genius. 2 Broadway producers find a legislative loophole that will allow them to make tons of money if their production fails. So they decide to look for the worst play ever written and produce it. And the one they end up going for is a musical called Springtime for Hitler, which was written by an honest-to-God Nazi and portrays Adolf Hitler as the hero of World War II. That's f***ing incredible. The best thing about The Producers, other than the premise, is that it isn't afraid to make fun and laugh at absolutely everything. Jokes about Nazis? Check. Jokes about people with behavioral problems? Check. Jokes about old ladies? Check. It's a film that understands that comedy mustn't have filters or boundaries, because then it loses its essence. The performances in the film were great, but the best one by far was Gene Wilder. He was truly the MVP of the film. He was hilarious, but he was genuinely earnest as well, and he made me feel for him. His little speech near the end was legitimately heartwarming, I'm not gonna lie. What brought the film down for me slightly was that some of the jokes fell flat, and the film kinda just shows up and leaves. I usually don't say this about films, but I wish this film was longer. By the time it was over, it felt like I didn't watch anything too substantial. However, with that being said, what is in this film is great, and the negatives didn't take away from the overall experience. This was a great debut with great laughs, and I enjoyed it a lot. In terms of the funniest moment, there were a bunch to choose from, like the Hitler auditions and the musical itself, which was a riot. But my personal favorite moment was when Ula, the secretary, went to work.
Go to work.
Number 3. History of the World, Part 1. From the very first Mel Brooks film to the very first Mel Brooks film I've ever watched. I watched it when I was much younger, and I remember finding it very funny. Now, after seeing it again in preparation for this video, the first thing that comes to mind is, when I was a kid I probably missed or didn't understand over half of the jokes in this movie. How the hell did I find it funny? Anyway, now as an adult, I can understand all of the adult humor, and it's hilarious. History of the World Part 1 is easily one of the funniest films Mel Brooks has ever made. The jokes in here fly quick and hit hard, and the loose, sketch-heavy plot only helps. The film is filled to the brim with wordplay jokes, set design jokes, jokes relating specifically to each time period the film takes us to. The variety is fantastic here, and every time the film switches things up, it finds a new way to stay creative with its humor. The film showcases a bunch of memorable characters, like the Roman Empress played by Madeline Kahn, Harvey Korman's hilariously named Count de Money, and Mel Brooks' very own French King / Piss Boy. All of these characters and more were extremely fun to watch. I enjoyed the brisk pace, the short runtime that doesn't overstay its welcome, and the funnier than average jokes, for Mel at least. It also has a crazy ending, inspired by another Mel Brooks film that we're yet to get to, that worked really well. I highly enjoyed this film from top to bottom, and it's one of Mel's best by far. Just like the producers, it's hard to pick the funniest moment here, but it's probably the Empress trying to pick her companions for the midnight orgy. She does it in a creative way.
I love quick time, Harch.
Number 2. Blazing Saddles. This is probably, pound for pound, Mel Brooks' funniest film. It's an utterly silly film, but in the best way, and it proudly doesn't take itself seriously at all. The jokes are a barrage here, they're non-stop and all over the place. Some hit harder than others, but all of them at least got a smile out of me. I love westerns as a genre, so watching all the western-related jokes was especially fun for me. Although, of course, the jokes weren't limited to just making fun of the genre. All of the performances across the board were fantastic. Cleavon Little was outstanding in this movie, one of the better leads in Mel Brooks' filmography. He was super charming and confident, and every time he was on screen, I was having a good time. Gene Wilder steals the show again here, just like in The Producers. I'm sensing a pattern here. In this film, he plays his character straight, which just makes it funnier because of how serious he takes himself. Also, when the sudden bursts of silly come out of him, like when his voice cracks after smoking a joint,
Listen, Bart.
it's way funnier as a result. The film's villain was also a highlight, played delightfully once again by Harvey Korman. Just a dumb, silly character that's easy to make fun of. Mel Brooks' small role was excellent as well. Another massive highlight that I have to mention was the ending of the film. This is the ending that inspired History of the World's ending. It was very creative and it showed up out of nowhere. It was legitimately one of the biggest WTF moments in film history. And I'm not just talking about comedy here, I'm talking about all of film history. Blazing Saddles was a rip-roaring good time, a terrifically fun film to help you shut off your brain for 90 minutes and enjoy life. The funniest moment was probably when Gene Wilder showed Cleavon Little why he can't shoot his guns anymore.
Steady as a rock. Yeah, but I shoot with this hand.
And the best Mel Brooks film of all time is Young Frankenstein. We've reached the top of the mountain, and honestly, this was an easy choice for the top spot. Remember when I said that Mel Brooks made 2 spoofs about classic horror stories? Well, this was the earlier of the 2, the better of the 2, and the best film he's ever made. What sets this one apart from the rest of the pack is that this is the only one of Brooks' filmography that actually feels like a classic motion picture, one that transcends its genre to become something more, something bigger and better. Young Frankenstein might not be as consistently funny as Blazing Saddles, even though it's still damn funny, but it is a much better made film than his other work. The cinematography is legitimately gorgeous at times. The black and white holds up really well. In terms of the story, I was very pleasantly surprised with the direction this movie takes. It isn't just a mere spoof of Frankenstein and the horror genre at large, it also serves as a sort of non-canonical sequel to the original Frankenstein films, because it follows the original Dr. Frankenstein's grandson.
My name, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
Well, excuse me, Frankenstein, I'm sorry. One of the major reasons why this is my favorite Mel Brooks film is that Gene Wilder, who is awesome here as always, gets way more opportunity to shine here because unlike in The Producers and Blazing Saddles, he's the main character. Finally, my favorite Mel Brooks cast member gets the main spotlight, and he does not disappoint, delivering my favorite lead performance in all of Mel Brooks' filmography. The supporting cast are also terrific here, with Peter Boyle, Cloris Leachman, Terry Garr, and Madeline Kahn delivering excellent performances. A special shout out, however, has to go to Marty Feldman, who even manages to risk upstaging Gene Wilder in certain scenes. He was a blast to watch. Most of the jokes in the film are the usual silly Mel humor we're used to, but some of the jokes felt more thought out, and the punchlines felt more satisfying than ever. Needless to say, the humor works really well here. It's one of his funniest films. Just like westerns, I love the horror genre very much, and all of the horror-related jokes stuck the landing for me. With Young Frankenstein, you get a hilarious comedy, but you also get amazing comedic performances, great visuals, great atmosphere, and a sharper-than-usual script. In short, what you get is a stone-cold classic, and my personal favorite Mel Brooks film of all time. Oh, and the funniest moment was when they knock on the door.
What knockers?
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. How do you rank Mel Brooks' filmography? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know which ranking video you'd like to see me do next. I'm always interested in hearing your suggestions. Again, thank you all so much, and have a good one.